Hello, my name is Adriana and I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to go on an acoustic journey with you today. Now, who doesn't like a little bit of mystery with their journey? Well, I'll tell you that you are surrounded by mystery as the sounds and silence that you hear actually contain this whole other world of communication and messages that we haven't always been able to decode until now. So the sounds that you hear are what are referred to as a soundscape or your soundscape. Even more mysterious, though, are the sounds that are buried in what you hear as silence. Sounds that are beyond the human range of hearing and that are a part of this broader idea of the acoustical environment. Now, all sounds, both audible and inaudible to humans, communicate essential messages to the survival of living things, allowing them to avoid danger and find food, water, and shelter. But just like noise interrupts human communication, noise also interrupts the whispers of the natural world. And I think that if we can really relearn how to truly listen, minimize all this noise that we make, as well as continue this exploration of silence, we may actually solve a greater mystery, which is finding the answer to a compassion for and for the survivability of all living things. So let's jump right in and start off with an activity. This is going to be a listening exercise. I'll play a clip. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about this, but I want you to simply experience it and kind of tune into what your responses are to the sound, as well as let your curiosity play out in figuring out what might actually be making this sound. So without further ado, what in the world was making that sound? We're going to get to the answer to that question at the end of the program as we revisit this clip. So just let that kind of linger in the back of your mind. But we're going to move forward with talking about a 101 kind of crash course on what soundscapes are, as well as what is an acoustic environment. So first, soundscape studies look at the relationship between a living thing and its environment mediated through sound. And soundscapes are very personal, individual, and unique, such that you and I could be sharing the same environment, listening to the same essentially sounds, but we'd be tuning into individual sounds and having very individual responses to those. If we think about the rhetorical question of the tree falling in the forest, this can help kind of illuminate this a little bit more, as well as differentiate a soundscape from something bigger called the acoustic environment. So, there's no human there to hear that tree crash. It's not a part of the human soundscape. It is, however, a part of the soundscape of that little squirrel standing in the tree's path. So, differentiations between soundscapes. Also, building on that, just like bat echolocation isn't inside our human hearing range, not a part of our soundscape, it would then be a part of the broader acoustical environment. Just like that tree crashing, though not a part of our soundscape, part of the acoustical environment. So, acoustical environments include all physical sound sources in a given area, both audible and inaudible to humans. And this understanding is going to allow us to kind of really dive into the importance of why we need to conserve sounds and soundscapes, and perceive what some of those threats might be. And so I want to ask you, what do you think a threat might be to a sound? And that might be kind of a weird question if you've never heard this one before. So if you're thinking, maybe, I don't know if you can hear the car off in the distance, or your cell phone in your pocket that might be going off, all of these human-generated noises are the threats to sounds. And so there are a couple of terms. One is masking, so this is an impact of noise, where it's actually masking or drowning out the natural sounds in an area, and noise pollution, and the impacts of noise pollution on an environment. And researchers are starting to look at what some of those long-term ecological effects could be. And some of the findings are pretty startling, as well as interesting. And one particular example is in a species of frog where the males, to adapt to the noise pollution, are calling at a higher pitch. That may not seem like a problem or a big deal to us, right? But The female frogs are actually listening for lower pitched calls because that indicates a more mature or experienced male. And so to put this in context for females, it would be like, for humans, it would be like a female human listening for, say, George Clooney, Barry White, and hearing Bart Simpson instead. And the researchers are trying to understand what maybe the long-term impacts on mate selection would be from noise pollution and those impacts and adaptations. So pretty interesting stuff. And to kind of cover what we've talked about so far, we've talked about what soundscapes are, this broader idea of acoustical environments, and how noise pollution can infiltrate and impact environments through impacting the sounds of an area. But I want to go back to something that I think is the most mysterious, the neatest and most curious, which is silence. And to start off, I want to share a quote with you, and it goes, "The tremendous silence flows back, sealing the canyon country beneath this transparent dome of timelessness. The sun comes up, a resounding fire, the silent gong of the dawn." Now that quote comes from the well-known Southwest conservationist and author Edward Abbey, and if you read his writings about the Southwest, you see his reverence for silence time and time again. But just like with sounds, us humans and animals can have a wide variety of responses to silence too, anywhere from feeling unnerved and unsettled by too much silence to feeling calm and tranquil with silence. But this mysterious kind of response to silence, the mysteries that lie within the silence, bring us back to that clip that we played at the very beginning. And I want to play it one more time. And the backstory on that weird sound is that researchers had gone down to southeast Utah with instruments to pick up on sounds outside of the human range of hearing, and focusing on researching bats. But when they picked up on this weird pattern that they'd never seen come from a bat, they got curious, and so they followed it to the noise or the sound source, which happened to be a cottonwood tree. And when they decided to drill a hole and drop a special microphone called a hydrophone in, they got this recording, took it back to their lab, manipulated it so that we could hear it, and essentially what they think that sound is actually signifying is that when a tree under normal moisture conditions soaks up moisture through the roots, maintaining osmotic pressure and balance, and that moisture flows through the xylem and phloem of the tree, eventually transpiring out the leaves. In the reverse context of that is during a drought condition, which is what they were recording, air bubbles get soaked up through the roots. And as that pressure builds up in the tree, some of these air bubbles burst, and that is essentially what we're hearing, is the popping cells and air in a tree. Now, if you think about, that's one tree making that sound, looking across a landscape and imagining all of these plants making sounds, creating this symphony of a landscape that we never hear. It only comes back to us as silence. However, other animals can hear those sounds. So insects are actually attracted to that sound because that means that there's sap generating from the tree. They go, they feed. Other animals come in and feed on the bugs, like birds and bats, and so on and so forth, such that you have this food web that's all built out from this noise or sound source of the tree. And this mystery of silence and sounds is just the beginning. So in closing, we've only just started scratching the surface on these mysteries, but I want to leave you with a couple of questions. And one is, what do you think the impacts of sounds and silence are on your life? And if everything out here, all living things, are connected by sound, silence, and our responses to them, then what do you think it means when we look at our responses to our soundscape and how that might reflect our value of all life? And I'm going to leave you with one last quote And this one comes from the well-known soundscape researcher Bernie Krause, and he says that the whisper of every leaf and creature speaks to us as the natural sources of our lives, and indeed may hold the secret to a love of all things, and especially our own humanity. Thank you so much for listening.